piano soundboard repair video, which this is a piano. This big thing in the middle is called a soundboard, and our job is to repair it. And one reason I'm working on this is I'm in the middle of trying to make a new soundboard over here. This is the old one. I've got all the parts in here and laid out, and I just got the soundboard panel yesterday. Thank you, Jude. And it is in the hot box drying right now. That's a whole nother thing, a whole nother series of videos, but this is a fix the soundboard video, which somebody asked me years ago, why would you ever replace the soundboard in a piano? And if you didn't notice the tone, it was a snide question that I failed to answer, and I don't know, it was about 20 years ago. I'm prepared to answer it now. I fixed this soundboard because I like to eat food and live indoors. So just a little backstory. I don't play the piano. I don't tune pianos. I fix pianos. If you want a new soundboard, I will make you a new soundboard. If you, meaning the owner of the piano or the tuner, you decide what you want to do. If you want the soundboard fixed, I will do that to the best of my abilities. And so back to the video. There's a lot of stuff here. Like I said, if I can remember half of it, it should be a fun video. But anyway, what I'm doing right now is I've just about finished gluing the board back down to the ribs in spots. In other words, these cracks, sometimes it pops off the ribs. What are the ribs? The ribs are over here, these, whatever you want to call these things, braces. We call them ribs in the piano world. And what they do is support the soundboard along the grain like this. And if you look at this, the way they're attached, they're glued on here. And sometimes when you have a crack, sometimes it'll separate from there. And you can't have that. Why? Because the soundboard acts as a structure. It's not one thing. Here is a piece of soundboard. And if I can do this with the camera on, you'll notice, I can't do this holding it with one hand, but this is very flexible in this direction. There's no strength to it. Now here's another piece of soundboard that's cut the other way. In other words, here's a piece of soundboard with the grain running this way. I can't do the same thing, but I'm pressing much harder and it's not deflecting much at all. So it's strong one way, not strong the other way. So what do? We combine the two things. Well, we combine the soundboard with a rib, and you take the weakness of this and the strength of a quarter sawn piece of spruce or pine running in this direction. You add those two things together like this, and you get strength in both directions. Now that's one point that you can make when people look at the cracks in a soundboard and say, well, look, the wood is cracked. Hasn't it lost strength? Isn't it, I don't know, I'm wandering down a dark alley here. It's certainly disintegrated slightly. I mean, this piece of wood here is together, it has some strength in this direction, but once it's cracked, it's lost, you could say it's lost a little bit of strength, but it is, again, supported by that rib or brace. It's still able to resist the pressure of the strings pushing down on this, as long as this is an integrated unit still. As long as these two pieces are working together and the strings are coming down here and they're still being supported by that. In other words, they're not just flat. If the soundboard's pushed flat, if it's lost that kind of strength, then, again, I'm not going to analyze the entire structure of the soundboard in one video. Nobody's going to do that. Hopefully this just may illustrate some some of the other things. But what I really wanted to focus on is repairing this, and what's important to do while you're trying to repair this. And getting the ribs glued back on is job one. And the first way to do that, I think, the best, easiest way to do that is get one of these first, which is called the glue bar deck, and it is a giant box that's very strong. And you get yourself some sticks or go bars or glue bars or whatever you want to call them. And this is just a very elegant system that allows you to really put either a lot of pressure or a tiny bit of pressure. I have thinner sticks anywhere, almost anywhere you want it, and it works out very nice. So a lot of times you'll just feel these cracks, and you can feel one side is sticking up. So what do? You get underneath here. You make sure that the soundboard is supported underneath, and if you had a light, you can see that the hide glue sucks some of the shellac off of there. Sorry about the camera jiggle, but I'm going to try to get a light over here. Oh my god, my camera's trying to turn itself on. Anyway, I did mess up the soundboard finish a little bit with a little bit of shellac. We'll fix that at some point. But it is, I don't have a third hand to grab a feeler gauge and show how it is now glued down. But that's the essence of gluing the ribs back down to the soundboard. Now, there's another aspect where the soundboard is glued in along here, what's called the rast. Listen to this. That means the soundboard has come loose around the rast, and that is important to fix, and oftentimes pretty challenging. And it involves getting underneath there with a long thing to get water and glue in there, and then press that down just like I did over here. And here's another spot where it was loose, but it was loose underneath this piece of molding. And I spent some time trying to figure out how to fix that, and then I just realized I'm going to have to take the molding off. Sometimes you got to do a little bit of damage to fix something. So now after I push that back down, I'll re-glue the molding on and get back to that. So here's another challenging spot, because you could even see before I started that this had a slight separation, which, I mean, this bind bar is here to help stop that from happening, because both the rast or the belly rail is pretty thin here, and this bind bar is supposedly there to help, at least help glue that down. But now but this is such a small gap that it provides a pretty big challenge for a small gap. Why? Because if I try to shove something bigger than this in there, I'm going to crush the wood fibers and distort the wood fibers. And one thing hide glue does not like to do is fill gaps. So I don't want to distort or crush the wood, but I still want to repair this. So what I've done is I've taken the screws out. Not all of them. I have one more. I want to rant about the screws in a second, but we'll get back to this. But so this board originally was glued with hide glue. Let me do a hide glue rant. And I think it's very important to repair this with hide glue, because it will mix with the old glue that's in there. You know, it won't mix well. It'll mix perfectly with the hide glue. There's already glue in there. It's just come loose. So what I'm going to do is use my heat gun here with heat and with a little bit of water that's from this jacuzzi's right here. I'm going to put some water in there and just very carefully wick the water in without distorting the wood. And that will take the old hide glue and sort of bring it back to life. Whatever hide glue is already still in there, it will sort of re-energize it, and I'll add as much glue as I can by just, having this thing here and pushing some glue in there with my finger, and the heat will help wick it deeper into this joint. And then I'll put some kind of caul, and I'll use those glue bars to glue this down. I'm not going to use the screws to try to clamp this down because it doesn't always work. Oh, here it is. This thing will go across the whole thing and clamp it down, and then put the screws back in. And I wanted to do a little screw rant. I hope I'm not. I'm kind of bouncing back through stuff like not very intelligently, but if you see the tops of these screws, please, if you're going to use these, unless you have new ones, we used to get new ones, real steel screws. I don't know where you get real steel screws anymore. But when you see a screw like this, here's a little tip. A, get a screwdriver that fits it perfectly. That's important. And put it in there, if you can find it with a camera on, and then hit it on the top. And what that'll do is take whatever finish is in that slot, and it'll just sort of get it out of the way and get this thing seated in there perfectly. These are usually in there tight, and when you back them up, and then when you take them over to, I have a little brass thing on the drill press that cleans them. I don't want you to screw these things up and put them back in with the slots all messed up. There's nothing to me worse looking than something like that. So let's learn how to take the screws out properly and put them back in properly. And then again, you're going to continue going along and find areas like this where you can barely see it, but that doesn't mean you don't have to fix it just because you can barely see it. And it means you have to fix it carefully. Come on, focus, guy. Well, anyway, believe me, it's barely, again, so I'm going to very carefully start working this open with some heat and some water, because you don't want to squash the wood. Don't distort the wood at all, or it won't glue back together properly. So what have I left out? I'm sure there's a lot of stuff I left out. But we can't fix it all today. I mean, this is, and then we'll start attacking the shims some other time.